On the morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey walked down 15 carpeted stairs in her home on 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. It was just after 5:30 a.m. She was wearing the same clothes she had worn the night before. She was about to make coffee. The family was leaving for Michigan in a few hours. She reached the last stair. She turned toward the kitchen, and on the wooden run of the staircase, someone had left 3 sheets of paper. It was a ransom note, 2.5 pages long, handwritten. It said that someone had taken JonBenét, her 6-year-old daughter, and that if she called the police, her daughter would be beheaded. Patsy Ramsey screamed. What she did not know, what nobody in that house knew, was that JonBenét was not missing. She was already dead. She was in the basement. She had been there for hours. And the person who wrote that note, the longest ransom note in American criminal history, had written it from inside the house. This case has been covered by thousands of journalists. It has spawned hundreds of documentaries. It has been investigated by 3 police chiefs, 2 district attorneys, the FBI, and a grand jury. And 30 years later, nobody has been arrested. But what I'm about to show you, about the note that makes no sense, the timeline that doesn't add up, the DNA that still sits in an evidence locker waiting for a name, and the single question that changes how you see everything, is why this case refuses to die. This is Trust Crime Explainer, where we follow the evidence and give victims back their story. Subscribe right now. Because what happened in that house between midnight and 6 a.m. on December 26, 1996, is the most investigated unsolved murder in American history. And 30 years later, we are closer than we have ever been. Before I take you into that house, before I walk you through the basement, the note, the evidence that doesn't fit, I want to spend time with the person this case is actually about. Because JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was not a pageant photograph. She was not a tabloid headline. She was not a theory. She was a 6-year-old girl. JonBenét was born on August 6, 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia. Her father, John Ramsey, was a successful businessman. Her mother, Patsy, was a former Miss West Virginia. They moved to Boulder in 1991, when John took over a computer company called Access Graphics. By 1996, Access Graphics had grown to over $1 billion in revenue. The Ramseys lived in a 7,000-square-foot home in one of Boulder's most affluent neighborhoods. They had a second home in Charlevoix, Michigan. They flew private. They hosted Christmas parties. JonBenét was the youngest of 2 children. Her brother Burke was 9. And here is what people who actually knew her will tell you: the teachers, the family friends, the parents of her classmates, that JonBenét was bright. She was funny. She was in 1st grade at High Peaks Elementary School. She had just performed in her school's Christmas pageant. She loved playing with her cat. She loved making beaded jewelry. She had asked for a new bike for Christmas. She had also competed in child beauty pageants. Those pageant images, the ones the media played on loop for decades, have become the visual shorthand for this case. The makeup, the costumes, the adult poses. Those images are part of the story, but they are not the story. They are part of the system that made this case explode into the national consciousness, a system we will examine later. But right now, on Christmas Day 1996, JonBenét Ramsey was a 6-year-old girl who had opened presents that morning, who had gone to a Christmas dinner at the home of family friends, who had been put to bed in a white nightgown with a star on the front, who was alive at 10 p.m., and who was dead by the time the sun came up. Boulder, Colorado in 1996 had not had a homicide in years. The Boulder Police Department was experienced in campus protests and property crime. It was not experienced in child murder. And then, on the morning after Christmas, a billionaire's daughter was found dead in her own basement. The system that responded to that crime scene was not built for it. The Boulder Police Department arrived at the Ramsey home at approximately 5:55 a.m. They found a distraught mother, a handwritten ransom note, and a missing child. They did what they were trained to do. They treated it as a kidnapping. They secured the 1st floor. They waited for the kidnapper to call. The note had specified a call between 8 and 10 a.m. They brought in the FBI, but they did not secure the basement. They did not secure the rest of the house. And for 7 hours, from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m., people walked through that crime scene. Family, friends. Family, pastor. Neighbors, John Ramsey's business associates. At approximately 1 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt, the only detective on scene for much of the morning, asked John Ramsey and family friend Fleet White to search the house one more time. John Ramsey went to the basement. He found a door to a small wine cellar, a windowless room in the basement's far corner. He opened the door. JonBenét was inside. She was on her back. Her arms were above her head. Her mouth was covered with duct tape. A white cord was wrapped around her neck. A white cord was wrapped around her right wrist. She was covered with a white blanket. John Ramsey carried her upstairs. He laid her on the floor of the living room. and the crime scene, whatever evidence it had held, was contaminated beyond recovery. But the broken crime scene is not the most disturbing thing about this case. The most disturbing thing, the detail that has kept investigators awake for 3 decades, is the note. It was 2.5 pages long. It was written on paper from inside the house. It demanded exactly $118,000, the amount of John Ramsey's recent bonus. And it was written by someone who had hours to sit in that kitchen in the dark while the family slept upstairs. Stay with me. Because what I'm about to walk you through, the evidence from that note, the autopsy findings that contradict the note's story, and the DNA that still waits for a name, is the reason this case is not closed. Let me take you through the timeline precisely, because the hours between Christmas night and the morning of the 26th are the heart of this case. And every theory, every single one, lives or dies in these hours. December 25th, evening, the Ramsey family attends a Christmas dinner at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White, close friends who lived approximately 2 miles away. They arrive at approximately 5 p.m. The children play. The adults socialize. JonBenét is wearing a red turtleneck and black velvet pants. At approximately 8:30 p.m., John Ramsey prepares the family car for their early flight to Michigan the next morning. He places gifts in the car. He places a bicycle, a Christmas gift for JonBenét, in the garage. At approximately 9 p.m., the family leaves the Whites' home. They arrive home at approximately 9:30 p.m. John Ramsey takes a sleeping Burke to his 3rd-floor bedroom. Patsy Ramsey helps JonBenét get ready for bed. JonBenét falls asleep in the car, so John carries her upstairs. Patsy changes her into a white nightgown. Burke later told investigators in 1998 interviews that he woke up briefly and may have heard JonBenét walking to her room. He went back to sleep. John Ramsey went to bed at approximately 10:30 p.m. Patsy Ramsey went to bed at approximately 10:45 p.m. The house went quiet. December 26th, the early morning hours. Here is where the timeline fractures into theories. The autopsy, conducted by Dr. John Mayer, Boulder County coroner, on December 27th, revealed 2 critical findings. JonBenét had suffered a severe blunt force trauma to the right side of her head. The injury was approximately 8.5 inches in length. It had caused a linear fracture of her skull. Dr. Mayer later testified that the force required would have been significant, consistent with a heavy object or a swinging motion. JonBenét had been strangled with a garrote, a cord tied to a broken paintbrush handle from Patsy Ramsey's paint supplies. The cord had been pulled with enough force to leave a deep ligature furrow on her neck. The critical question that has divided investigators for 30 years, which came first, the head trauma or the strangulation? Dr. Mayer's autopsy indicated that the head trauma likely occurred first, and that JonBenét may have been unconscious but alive for some period of time before the strangulation killed her. There was bleeding in her brain, which suggested her heart was still beating when the head injury occurred. This means whoever did this struck her first, and then strangled her. And during that interval, however long it was, they wrote a note. What I am about to tell you comes from the Boulder Police Department case files, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit assessment, and the 1998 and 2000 interviews conducted with both Ramseys. The ransom note was found on the spiral staircase that led from the kitchen to the 2nd floor. It was written on paper from a notepad that belonged to Patsy Ramsey, a notepad kept in the kitchen. It was written with a pen that belonged to the Ramseys, a pen found in a cup on the kitchen counter. The note was 2.5 pages long. It was addressed to Mr. Ramsey. It claimed to be from a small foreign faction. It demanded $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return. It said that if the Ramseys called the police, JonBenét would be beheaded, and it ended with the words, "Victory SBTC." Here is why this note has haunted investigators for 3 decades. The amount, $118,000, was not a round number. It was not $1 million. It was the exact amount of John Ramsey's bonus from Access Graphics, a figure that appeared on his pay stub. A kidnapper who had surveilled the family might know the Ramseys were wealthy, but a kidnapper would not know the exact amount of a recent bonus, the length. Most ransom notes are short, a few sentences, demands, threats. This note was 2.5 pages of dense prose. It referenced movies, Speed, Ransom, Dirty Harry, that the writer had apparently watched. It took time to write. It took drafts. Investigators found earlier drafts of the note in the same notepad pages that had been torn out and discarded. Someone had sat in that kitchen in the dark and practiced writing a ransom note. The handwriting. The Boulder Police Department collected handwriting samples from 73 people. They could not eliminate Patsy Ramsey as the author, but they could not confirm she wrote it either. The note contained a mix of cursive and print. It contained unusual word choices. Handwriting experts have been divided for 30 years. The note was written after the murder. JonBenét's body was in the basement when that note was placed on the stairs. There was no kidnapping. There was no small foreign faction. The note was a fiction written by someone who was already inside the house, with access to the kitchen, with knowledge of John Ramsey's bonus and with hours to spare. Someone wrote that note while a dead child lay in the basement. That is not a theory. That is a fact. Let me take you through the physical evidence, the pieces that have produced 3 decades of theories. There was a broken window in the train room, a small room in the basement. The window had been broken for months, according to John Ramsey. A suitcase was placed beneath it on the basement floor. The theory: an intruder entered through the window, used the suitcase as a step and left the same way. But the spider web in the window well was intact. The dust and debris on the windowsill were undisturbed. There were no footprints in the snow outside the window, and it had snowed on Christmas night. An intruder who entered through that window would have had to do so without disturbing a spider web and without leaving footprints in fresh snow. The cord around JonBenét's neck was tied to a broken paintbrush handle from Patsy Ramsey's art supplies. The paintbrush was found in a paint tote that belonged to Patsy. The cord was not found elsewhere in the house in any matching quantity. The knot was sophisticated. Whoever made it knew how to construct a garrote. The duct tape over JonBenét's mouth was black duct tape. It did not match any duct tape found in the Ramsey home. It had a perfect lip print on the adhesive side, suggesting it had been placed on JonBenét's mouth while she was still alive, or very shortly after death. JonBenét was found covered with a white blanket from her own bed. Someone had placed it over her body after she was dead. They had arranged her on her back. They had crossed her arms. That is not the behavior of a stranger in a hurry. That is the behavior of someone who knew her. But there was one piece of evidence that didn't fit any theory. And it was microscopic. In 1997, DNA testing was performed on blood found in JonBenét's underwear. It was a small amount of male DNA, not belonging to John Ramsey, Burke Ramsey, or any identified family member. It was labelled Unknown Male 1. In 2003, the FBI entered this DNA profile into CODIS. No match. In 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office under Mary Lacey issued a public letter exonerating the Ramsey family based on this DNA. The letter stated that the profile belonged to the killer. The family wept. For a moment it looked like the science had cleared their name and identified an intruder, but then touched DNA analysis, technology that became available years later, suggested something devastating. The DNA amount was minuscule. The location was consistent with incidental contact during the manufacturing of the clothing. It could have been a factory worker. It could have been transferred from any surface. The exoneration that gave the family hope became the complication that kept the case alive. In 2021, the Boulder Police Department announced they were using new genealogical DNA testing methods on the evidence. As of 2026, those tests are ongoing. The DNA has not been matched to anyone, and that is where this case lives. In the gap between a profile and a name, this case has produced hundreds of theories. But there is one question that reframes all of them. What if the note wasn't written to fool the police? What if it was written to fool someone in the house? Think about it. The $118,000 figure, John Ramsey's exact bonus, is not something a random kidnapper would know. It is something someone close to him would know. The length of the note suggests time and comfort, not panic. The writer used Patsy's notepad and Patsy's pen. They wrote it in the kitchen in the dark while the family slept upstairs. If an intruder wrote that note, they were not a stranger. They were someone who had been in that home before, someone who knew the house layout. Someone who knew John Ramsey's finances. And if someone in the house wrote that note, someone who had just killed JonBenét accidentally or intentionally, the note becomes a script, a performance, a way to delay discovery long enough to escape blame. In 1999, a Boulder County grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of child abuse resulting in death. But District Attorney Alex Hunter declined to sign the indictment, citing insufficient evidence. The DNA did not match the family. The physical evidence did not place John, Patsy, or 9-year-old Burke in that basement with certainty. And without a confession or a witness, the case stalled. The 2016 CBS documentary suggested Burke may have struck JonBenét with a flashlight during a sibling dispute, and that the parents staged the scene. Burke Ramsey sued CBS for defamation and settled in 2019, but here is what remains. The note was written by someone who knew that house. The DNA has not matched anyone. And after 30 years no one has come forward. The note still asks. The DNA still waits, and someone somewhere knows which theory is true. This case did not just remain unsolved. It created the modern true crime industry, Before JonBenét Ramsey, true crime was a niche genre. After her, it became a national obsession. The tabloid journalism that camped on that snowy Boulder lawn for months, the camera flashes, the anonymous sources, the accusations dressed as reporting, became the template for how America consumes tragedy. The pageant images that the media played on loop created a conversation about child performance culture that continues today. The Ramsey family became suspects in the court of public opinion before they were ever charged in a court of law. Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer in 2006. She was buried next to JonBenét in Marietta, Georgia. She maintained her innocence until her death. John Ramsey remarried. He has continued to push for independent DNA testing that he believes Boulder PD has resisted. Burke Ramsey is now in his late 30s. He has given interviews. He has sued media outlets. He has never been criminally charged, and the case remains open. In 2026, genealogical DNA testing has solved cases older than this one. The technology exists. The evidence exists. The only question left is whether the profile in that evidence locker still holds the answer and whether someone is still looking hard enough to find it. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was 6 years old. She loved making beaded jewelry. She loved her cat. She had just performed in her school's Christmas pageant. She had asked for a bike for Christmas. She was found in a basement wine cellar with a cord around her neck and tape over her mouth, covered by a blanket that someone had placed over her. Someone put that blanket over her, someone arranged her arms, and someone wrote a 2.5-page note while she lay dead in the basement below them. JonBenét Ramsey deserves a name attached to her case. She has been waiting for 30 years. If you believe JonBenét Ramsey deserves justice, not as a theory, but as a person, hit the like button right now. It tells YouTube to show this story to someone else who needs to hear it. Say her name in the comments. JonBenét, tell me what detail from this case you cannot stop thinking about. Because this community always has the most important things to say and I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on notifications. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey. Her name deserves to be remembered. If you want to understand exactly how cold case DNA testing works, how a profile from 1996 can find a name in 2026, the link to my Read the Crime course is in the description.